Morning sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of the Grand Crest lobby, bathing the marble floors in gold. It was the day of the hotel's big ownership announcement, an event that would draw investors, reporters, and staff from across the country. Daniel arrived early, dressed in a fitted charcoal suit, his name badge now replaced by a simple silver pin engraved with Dr. Cruz, Executive Director. Gone was the Bellboy uniform. In its place stood a man who carried quiet confidence and command. But Daniel wasn't thinking about power or wealth. He was thinking about the lesson his father always told him before he passed. Respect isn't about titles, son. It's about how you treat people when you think no one's watching. He remembered those words every time someone underestimated him, especially people like Victoria Langston. Across the hotel, Victoria was finishing her morning routine. She was live on her phone again, sitting on the edge of her bed in a silk robe. "Another busy day ahead," she said to her viewers. "Apparently the hotel's having some corporate event downstairs. Let's hope it doesn't interrupt breakfast. You know how these places love to overdo their PR." She laughed to herself, checking her reflection. "Anyway, the staff could use better management. Maybe I'll mention it in my review." Her assistant, Mia, looked uneasy. Ms. Langston, maybe you shouldn't say that on camera?" Victoria waved her off. "Please, my followers love honesty. If they can't handle feedback, that's their problem." By the time she entered the restaurant for breakfast, the place was buzzing. Banners hung near the lobby entrance. Grand Crest Hotel's new vision, new leadership. Guests and journalists gathered, whispering excitedly. Victoria frowned. "What's all this noise about?" "The management reveal," said Mia. "I think they're announcing a new executive partner." Victoria smirked. "Perfect timing. Maybe I'll offer them some free advice." She spotted Daniel walking through the lobby, confident, dignified, flanked by senior staff. But without his bellboy uniform, she didn't recognize him right away. She rolled her eyes. "That one again? Why is he always around? Shouldn't someone be cleaning something?" Mia opened her mouth to respond but stopped. "Ma'am, I think he's—" Victoria was already walking away. Minutes later, Daniel took the stage. Cameras flashed, microphones clicked. The lobby was packed. "Good morning," he began. His voice was calm, resonant. The same polite tone she once mocked, now commanding the room. "I want to thank you all for being here. Today marks a new chapter for the Grand Crest family." A murmur went through the crowd as Victoria finally looked up from her phone. Her hand froze. That voice. Her eyes lifted and she saw him. The bellboy. The man she'd insulted in the elevator. The one she told to stick to what he's good at. He stood there in a tailored suit, addressing a crowd of executives and reporters. A hotel banner behind him read, "Daniel Rafael Cruz, Executive Director, Grand Crest Hotels." The color drained from her face. Daniel continued smoothly, "Our mission is not just luxury, but dignity, for every guest and every employee, because true service starts with respect." Applause filled the room. Victoria's throat went dry. She whispered to Mia, He's not a bellboy?" Mia looked at her helplessly. "I tried to tell you." Victoria sank into her chair, her heart pounding. Every memory of her arrogance from the day before came flooding back. The way she dismissed him, the tone she used, the words that cut deeper than she realized. On stage, Daniel's eyes scanned the room. For a moment, they landed on her. He didn't glare or smirk. He simply looked, calm and composed, before turning back to the cameras. It made her stomach twist even more. After the announcement, Daniel stayed in the lobby, speaking to investors and shaking hands. A few reporters asked questions about his background. "Mr. Cruz, you started in this company as a trainee, correct?" "Yes," he said with a modest smile. "I wanted to understand every part of the hotel, from the kitchen to housekeeping. My father believed leadership starts from the ground floor." The crowd nodded in admiration. Victoria watched from a distance, her nerves buzzing. The weight of humiliation pressed on her chest. She had built her brand on confidence, never wrong, never embarrassed, but right now, she wanted to disappear. Finally, she stood up and approached him. Daniel turned just as she stopped a few feet away. "Mr. Cruz," she said quietly. "I didn't realize." He gave her a polite smile. "Good morning, Ms. Langston." His tone was the same as it had been yesterday, gentle, professional. That somehow hurt more. "I owe you an apology," she said softly. "I was rude to you. There's no excuse for that." He nodded once. "Thank you for saying that." She hesitated. "If I'd known who you were, I never would've." Daniel raised a hand gently. "That's exactly the problem, Ms. Langston. Respect shouldn't depend on who someone is." Her lips parted, but no words came out. He continued, still calm. "Yesterday, I was a bellboy in your eyes. Today I'm an executive. But I'm the same person I was in that elevator." She swallowed hard, guilt washing over her. "You're right." He gave a small nod, his eyes kind but firm. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay. Breakfast is complimentary, as always." Then he turned away, greeting another guest. Victoria stood frozen, realizing this was the first time in years someone had corrected her, and done it with grace. She sat back down at her table, staring at her untouched coffee. For the first time, she didn't post anything online. Upstairs in his office, Daniel looked out over the city skyline, his reflection shimmering in the glass. He sighed softly, remembering his father's words again. "You don't teach people with anger, son. You teach them by example." And that's exactly what he'd done. The lobby of the Grand Crest Hotel shimmered under the soft morning light. Marble floors gleamed, golden chandeliers reflected against the glass walls, and the faint scent of coffee floated through the air. It was the kind of place where money didn't just walk in, it arrived with a sense of entitlement. The automatic doors slid open, and a woman stepped inside. She wore a white designer suit, her sunglasses perched high, a diamond bracelet catching every flicker of light. Her name was Victoria Langston, an influencer and business consultant who lived online more than in reality. Behind her trailed two assistants, one balancing a laptop bag and the other clutching her coffee order. "Finally," she muttered. "This place looks half-decent. Let's hope they don't mess up like the last one." She approached the check-in desk with an impatient sigh. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Welcome to Grand Crest, Ms. Langston. We have your presidential suite ready." "Good," she said sharply. "And I expect it spotless. I can't deal with unprofessionalism today." Before the receptionist could respond, a young bellboy appeared beside the luggage cart. He couldn't have been more than 24, dressed in the hotel's classic navy uniform with polished brass buttons. His name tag read Daniel. "Good morning, ma'am," he said politely, his voice carrying a soft accent. "May I take your bags to your room?" Victoria glanced at him, first at his uniform, then his accent, and smirked. "Oh, you're one of those international hires, aren't you? Where are you from?" He smiled kindly. "Originally from the Philippines, ma'am." She chuckled under her breath. "Right, of course. They'll hire anyone these days." Daniel froze for just a second, long enough for the words to sting, but he quickly smiled again, unfazed. "Your suite is on the 42nd floor, ma'am. I'll make sure everything is arranged." She waved a dismissive hand. "Just try not to drop anything expensive." Her assistants tried not to look at each other as Daniel quietly took her luggage and headed toward the elevator. Victoria followed, her phone already in her hand, live streaming her morning to hundreds of followers. "Arriving at yet another hotel," she said into her phone camera. "Hopefully the staff here are at least competent. You'd be surprised how hard that is to find." Daniel pressed the elevator button. The doors slid open. He stepped aside. "After you, ma'am." She walked in first without acknowledgement. The elevator ride was silent except for the faint click of her nails on the phone screen. Daniel stood behind her, straight posture, eyes ahead, saying nothing. When the elevator stopped, he stepped out first and led her down a hallway lined with elegant gold-framed paintings. At her door, he inserted the keycard and pushed it open. The suite glowed with sunlight, the skyline stretching out across the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. Victoria walked inside and gave an unimpressed hum. "I guess it'll do." Daniel carefully placed her luggage near the marble table. "If there's anything else you need, I'll call someone who actually speaks fluent English," she interrupted with a thin smile. He blinked but didn't react. "Of course, ma'am. Have a wonderful stay." She turned away, already scrolling her phone again. Aha! As Daniel left the suite, the door closed softly behind him. For a brief moment, his professional expression faded. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. He had worked at this hotel for months, never once showing frustration to a guest. But her words, those sharp, casual words, cut deeper than he let on. Still, Daniel knew something that Victoria didn't. Something that made him smile just slightly as he walked back toward the elevator. Because the truth was, Daniel wasn't just a bellboy. He was the owner's son, and soon-to-be managing partner of the entire Grand Crest chain. Later that afternoon, Victoria sat by the rooftop pool, her laptop open and her phone propped on a mini tripod. She was recording a new vlog, The Hidden Struggles of a Modern Businesswoman. "Some people," she said to the camera, "don't understand professionalism. You can tell everything about a company by the way their employees speak. Presentation matters." Her assistant brought her a drink, but Victoria didn't thank her. She never did. Behind her, Daniel walked quietly through the pool deck, inspecting the staff. He greeted the servers, checked the towel inventory, and made notes on his tablet. None of the guests realized he wasn't just an employee. He was auditing the entire hotel before the upcoming management announcement. When his eyes met Victoria's across the pool, he offered a polite smile. She didn't recognize him at first. Without the bellboy hat, in his crisp white dress shirt and fitted navy blazer, he looked entirely different, calm, composed, powerful. She gave him a brief, disinterested glance before returning to her camera. "See, this place is gorgeous," she said. "If only the staff matched the scenery." Daniel almost laughed. A few minutes later, he walked up to the bar to check the drink list. The bartender whispered, "She's been complaining all day, filming us for her vlog. Said the service lacks refinement." Daniel nodded. "Don't worry about it. Just keep doing your best." Victoria turned her head, hearing his voice again. She frowned. Didn't I see you earlier carrying my bags?" He turned politely. "Yes, ma'am." "Daniel." She gave a mocking smile. "Right, Daniel. Well, maybe you should stick to bellboy duties. This area's for guests." He smiled faintly. "I understand, ma'am. But I assure you, I belong here." She laughed under her breath. "Sure you do." Then, dismissing him with a wave, she turned back to her camera and whispered, "See what I mean? Some people just don't know their place." Daniel simply nodded, offering her a respectful nod before walking away. But inside, a quiet plan was forming. Because tomorrow morning, there would be a press conference in the same lobby where Victoria had rolled her eyes at him. And this time, she would learn exactly whose place she'd been standing in. Victoria didn't leave the breakfast table for a long time. Her coffee went cold, her croissant untouched. The lively chatter of guests around her only made the silence in her chest feel heavier. Her assistant, Mia, finally spoke softly. "You okay, Ms. Langston?" Victoria blinked, coming back to herself. "No," she said honestly. "I think I've just made the biggest fool of my career." Mia gave a faint smile. "It could have been worse." "How?" Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mocked the owner of the hotel. On camera. My followers probably saw it live." Mia hesitated. We could take down that video before it gets clipped and reposted. Victoria buried her face in her hands. Do it, please. She had built her brand on confidence, composure, and authority, but right now, she didn't feel like any of those things. For the first time in years, she felt small. Upstairs, Daniel sat in his office reviewing the day's reports. He should have been satisfied. The announcement had gone perfectly. Investors were thrilled. The staff had a renewed sense of pride. But one image stuck in his mind, the look on Victoria's face when she realized the truth. Not out of vengeance, but out of empathy. He had seen that look before. The look of someone whose walls had finally cracked. There was a soft knock on his door. His assistant peeked in. Sir, Ms. Langston requested a private meeting. Should I decline? Daniel leaned back in his chair. No, he said after a moment. Let her in. When Victoria entered, she looked different. No sunglasses, no phone, no practiced smile. Just her. Mr. Cruz, she began softly. Thank you for seeing me. Daniel gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. Please, sit. She did. For a moment, neither spoke. The city skyline glowed behind him, the morning sun washing the office in clean light. I came to apologize again, she said finally. I know you don't owe me a second chance, but I need to say this. Daniel listened quietly, hands folded. I've spent years teaching people how to be confident, she continued. How to command respect in business, how to hold power in a room. But I forgot the most basic thing, that none of it means anything without kindness. Yesterday I talked down to you like I was better. And that says more about me than you. Daniel's expression softened slightly. It takes strength to admit that. She laughed bitterly. No, it takes guilt. And I've got plenty of that right now. You're human, he said simply. She looked up at him, surprised. You're not angry? He smiled faintly. Anger doesn't fix people. My father used to tell me, people learn best when they're treated the way they should have treated you. Victoria's eyes stung with unexpected tears. You sound like a good man. He was, Daniel said quietly. He started this company with one small inn and a belief that everyone deserves dignity, whether they walk in wearing a suit or carrying luggage. She nodded slowly. I'd like to believe I can change that part of me. Daniel studied her for a moment, then leaned forward. Then start with what you already have, influence. The people who follow you listen. Show them that success isn't about being above others, but lifting them up. Victoria blinked, his words sinking deep. You're giving me a lesson after what I did to you? He smiled. Let's call it balance. A faint laugh escaped her. You're a better person than I'd be in your place. I'm not better, Daniel said softly. I just remember what it's like to be on the other side. Later that day, Victoria went live again. But this time, it wasn't glamour or gossip. She sat in her hotel room, looking directly into the camera. No filters, no lights, just honesty. Hi, everyone, she began. Today's not a normal post. I did something I'm not proud of. I judged someone for how they spoke, how they dressed, and where they worked. But I was wrong. And the person I mocked turned out to be one of the kindest, wisest people I've ever met. She took a deep breath. If you've ever thought someone was beneath you, stop. Because you never know who you're talking to or what they've been through. And more importantly, you never know what they might teach you. The live chat flooded with comments. Some shocked, some supportive, others inspired. Daniel watched the stream later that evening from his office. The video had already gone viral. People were calling it the apology that changed everything. He smiled quietly, not because he felt victorious, but because he saw growth. A week later, Victoria requested one final meeting before checking out. When she entered the lobby this time, her tone was calm, her presence humble. She found Daniel near the front desk, reviewing schedules. I wanted to thank you again, she said. And I brought something. She handed him a white envelope. Inside was a donation slip, $50,000 made out to the Cruz Foundation for Employee Education. Daniel looked up. "This is generous." "It's the least I can do," she said. "You told me to use my influence for good. I want to help your staff, language classes, hospitality courses, whatever they need." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he smiled. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," she said softly, "because I was wrong, and people who are wrong should fix what they break." Daniel extended his hand. She shook it, this time with respect in her eyes instead of arrogance. As she turned to leave, Daniel called after her. "Ms. Langston." She stopped. "Next time you stay here," he said with a grin, "try the staff breakfast. It's better than the influencer menu." She laughed, genuinely this time. "Deal." That night, as she drove away from the Grand Crest, the city lights blurred outside her car window. She wasn't thinking about followers or sponsors, just about how a single moment of humility had reshaped everything she thought she knew. And upstairs in the hotel office, Daniel stood at the window, looking down at the driveway where her car disappeared into the distance. He smiled quietly and whispered, "Respect isn't taught, it's lived." A full year passed. The Grand Crest hotel chain flourished under Daniel's leadership. New partnerships, better staff benefits, and community programs that carried his father's legacy forward. His face began appearing in business magazines and news profiles, often accompanied by headlines like, "The Humble Executive Transforming Hospitality." But Daniel didn't care about fame. He cared about purpose. And every morning, when he walked through the lobby and greeted every employee by name, from the janitors to the chefs, he felt closer to his father than ever before. One spring afternoon, as he reviewed renovation plans for a new branch, his assistant entered with a note. "Sir, a guest is asking for you in the conference hall. Says it's about a charity proposal." Daniel glanced up. "Name? Victoria Langston." He paused for a moment. A faint smile touched his lips. "Send her in." The conference hall was bathed in natural light from wide windows. Victoria stood near the display board, reviewing a portfolio of documents. Her style was still elegant, but softer now, no designer logos, no forced perfection. She looked real. When Daniel walked in, she turned and smiled warmly. "Mr. Cruz." "Ms. Langston," he replied, shaking her hand. "It's been a while." "Too long," she said. "And please, call me Victoria. Only if you call me Daniel." She laughed lightly. "Deal." He gestured to the folders. "So, what brings you back to my hotel?" She handed him a proposal. "I started a non-profit Bridge of Words. We fund English classes for immigrant workers in hospitality. I wanted to partner with Grand Crest. Your staff inspired it." Daniel raised his brows, impressed. "You're serious?" "I am," she said with a quiet conviction. "I used to think I was self-made. But truth is, I was blind to how many people made my life easier while I looked down on them. I don't want to be that person again." Daniel flipped through the pages. The program was solid. Curriculum outlines, success metrics, testimonials from workers already enrolled. "This is good," he said, genuinely impressed. "Really good." She smiled, slightly nervous. "So you'll consider it?" "I'll more than consider it," he said. "I'll sponsor it." Her eyes widened. "Daniel, that's—" He cut her off gently. "This isn't charity. This partnership. You're doing something meaningful. Let's make it bigger." She looked at him for a long moment, her voice softer now. "You really meant it, didn't you? What you said back then, about treating people the way they should have treated you." He nodded. "My father built this company on that rule. I'm just trying not to forget it." Victoria smiled, but there was emotion in her eyes. "You haven't." Later, they walked through the hotel garden, sunlight filtering through the trees. The air smelled of jasmine and new beginnings. "You know," Victoria said, "I've stayed in hundreds of hotels, but none feel like this one. There's something human about it. Daniel chuckled. That's intentional. Every new employee spends their first week in housekeeping before they do anything else. I want them to understand service before leadership. That's beautiful, she said quietly. You've created something rare. He glanced at her. You helped in a way. She looked confused. Me? You reminded me that not everyone who falls has to stay there, he said. You fell, learned, and built something out of it. That takes strength. She looked down, humbled. I used to think strength meant never admitting weakness. Turns out, it's the opposite. Daniel smiled. My father used to say, the strongest people are the ones who apologize first. They walked in silence for a moment, the wind rustling through the leaves. Finally, Victoria asked, do you ever miss it? Being the guy no one noticed. He laughed softly. Sometimes. There was peace in anonymity. But I wouldn't trade this. I get to build something that matters. And to think, she said with a playful grin, I once told you to stick to carrying bags. Daniel chuckled. And I did. Just bigger ones. They both laughed. It wasn't awkward anymore, it was shared history. Growth. A few weeks later, Bridge of Words officially launched in partnership with Grand Crest Hotels. The event took place in the same ballroom where Victoria had once live-streamed her arrogance to the world. Now, she stood on stage beside Daniel, both of them smiling proudly as workers from dozens of backgrounds clapped. Victoria took the microphone. A year ago, I made a mistake that changed my life. I judged someone by the way he spoke, by where I thought he stood in life. But that man taught me something I'll never forget. Fluency doesn't define intelligence, and humility doesn't mean weakness. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, but this time, she didn't pose. She smiled from the heart. Daniel took the mic next. True hospitality isn't just serving others. It's understanding them. And this partnership proves that every voice deserves to be heard. They looked at each other as the crowd cheered. For both of them, it wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about responsibility to do something better with what they'd learned. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Victoria and Daniel stood again in the hotel garden, now empty and quiet. I'm proud of you, Daniel said. She smiled faintly. You sound like my father. He chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. You should, she said softly. You've become the kind of man people look up to. And you made me want to be better too. Daniel looked at her, sincerity in his eyes. Then we both learned something worth keeping. She nodded. Respect. And grace, he added. They stood there in the soft glow of evening, the sound of distant laughter echoing from the ballroom, and the memory of who they used to be slowly fading into something greater. Something neither of them could have imagined that first morning in the elevator. A year later, the world looked very different for both Daniel and Victoria. The Bridge of Words program had grown from one city to over 50. Hotels across the country began adopting it, offering free English and business communication classes to their immigrant staff. Grand Crest Hotels became the first international chain to make language training a permanent benefit for all employees. Reporters loved the story, the billionaire CEO who once worked as a bellboy, and the influencer who humbled herself to help others. But behind the cameras and headlines, it was never about image. It was about change. That morning, Daniel stood at the Grand Crest headquarters, watching a group of housekeepers laughing in the training room as they practiced English with their volunteer teachers. He smiled quietly. This was exactly what his father had dreamed of. A place where every worker, no matter their accent or uniform, was treated with respect. He turned to the wall behind him where a framed black and white photo hung. His father in front of the first Grand Crest Inn, shaking hands with a young porter. Below it was a small engraved plaque. Respect everyone. Success will follow. He touched the frame gently and whispered, We did it, Dad. Later that afternoon, the hotel ballroom was filled with guests once again. This time it wasn't for business. It was for celebration. The Grand Crest Foundation Gala was honoring the first graduating class of the Bridge of Words program. Employees from all backgrounds, housekeepers, cooks, receptionists, maintenance workers, took the stage one by one, receiving certificates, their families cheering proudly. Some cried, some hugged their instructors, and in the center of it all stood Daniel and Victoria, applauding each name. When it was time for speeches, Victoria stepped to the microphone first. Her voice was calm, heartfelt, and steady. "Last year," she began, "I walked into this hotel thinking I knew everything about success. I thought fluency meant intelligence, that titles meant worth. I was wrong." The room fell silent. "Because real intelligence," she continued, "is kindness. Real success is empathy. And no amount of money or fame replaces humility." Her eyes found Daniel's across the room. "I want to thank the man who taught me that, Mr. Daniel Cruz. Thank you for your patience, your grace, and your belief that people can change." Applause thundered through the hall. Daniel smiled modestly, then walked to the stage. When he spoke, his voice carried quiet strength. "Thank you, Victoria, and thank you to everyone here, the true heart of Grand Crest. A long time ago, someone looked at me and saw only a bellboy, and I'll admit, part of me wanted revenge. But what I realized is that revenge changes nothing. Understanding changes everything." He paused, letting his words settle. "My father once told me," he said softly, "that leadership is just service in a suit. And today, seeing all of you, the people who keep these doors open and these lights shining, I know he was right." The audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering. Some even cried. After the event, Daniel and Victoria slipped out to the rooftop terrace to breathe in the cool night air. The city glowed beneath them, thousands of lights reflecting across the glass towers like scattered stars. Victoria leaned against the railing. "You ever think about how far this all came from?" Daniel chuckled. "A spilled coffee? A rude comment." She laughed softly. "I was awful that day." "You were human," he said. "We all start somewhere." She nodded, eyes glistening. "You know, I think your father would be proud of you." Daniel looked out at the skyline, his expression soft. "I hope so, but I think he'd be prouder of this, of what we built." She smiled, touched by the humility in his words. "You mean the company?" He shook his head. "No, the idea. That kindness can be policy. That humanity can exist in business." They stood side by side in silence for a moment, the city wind brushing against their faces. "Daniel," she said quietly. "Yeah. Do you ever miss being invisible?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But I like this better. It's louder, but it means more." She looked down at the streets below. "I guess that's what real influence is. Not the kind that trends, the kind that stays." Daniel turned to her, his voice warm. "You found yours. So did you." Weeks later, Victoria visited one of the new Grand Crest training centers overseas. This one in Manila, the very place Daniel's father had opened his first in decades earlier. She watched as young hotel workers practiced their English lessons proudly, their faces glowing with confidence. One of the students asked her, "Ma'am, is it true you were mean to Mr. Cruz once?" Victoria laughed gently. "Yes," she said honestly. "And it's also true that he forgave me. That's why I'm here now, because everyone deserves a second chance to do right." The class applauded, and she smiled with tears in her eyes. That night, she called Daniel from her hotel balcony. The ocean waves rolled softly in the background. "Guess what?" she said over the phone. "I met one of your father's old employees today. He told me your dad used to sweep the lobby himself every morning just to talk to the staff." Daniel chuckled. "Yeah. He said he learned more with a broom than with a boardroom." Victoria smiled. "He raised you right." He paused for a moment, looking out at his own skyline back home. "We're both still learning." Maybe, she said softly, but you've taught me something I'll never forget. What's that? That leadership isn't about being followed. It's about being remembered. Daniel was quiet for a second, then replied, Then I think we both made our mark. As dawn broke the next morning, Daniel walked through the hotel lobby just like he used to, greeting each employee with a warm smile. When he reached the bell desk, a young trainee straightened nervously. Good morning, sir. Daniel smiled and adjusted the boy's name tag. Relax. You're doing great. The trainee grinned. Thank you, Mr. Cruz. As Daniel walked away, he caught his reflection in the glass wall. Not the bellboy he once was, but not the CEO the world saw either. Just a man living his father's words, one act of kindness at a time.